So this lecture or this discussion is about self-efficacy theory, and the reason why I've chosen this is because you're going to see self-efficacy as a construct in a lot of different models and theories. It's going to appear and reappear many times throughout the semester with different models and theories, and so I thought it would be a good place to start with a discussion about self-efficacy, what self-efficacy is, and how we can change self-efficacy. So think for just a minute, if I were to ask you right now in your current physical shape and condition and fitness level, if I were to ask you, could you run 10 miles right now? How confident would you be? Say maybe out of 10, 10 being very confident. How confident are you? So ask yourself that question. Where would I be? Okay, now what if I change and I say, how confident are you that you could run 1 mile? Does your level of confidence change from when I asked you to run 10 miles? It's quite likely that it's changed. Now, why has it changed? Well, obviously running 1 mile is very different from running 10 miles in terms of the amount of effort that it requires and perhaps your perception of the fitness that you would have to have in order to run 10 miles versus 1 mile. It might also be that you've run 1 mile before, and therefore you're a little bit more confident that you could do it, versus perhaps you haven't run 10 miles, or at least haven't done so for quite a long time. Therefore, you may not be confident that you could do it. Now, what sorts of things might contribute to your confidence? Well, perhaps you're a runner. Perhaps you're generally physically active. You exercise regularly, you play basketball, you play tennis, you ride bikes, you do something. And so you feel like your level of fitness is high. But also because you engage in other behaviors that are similar to running. So all of those things may contribute to your self-efficacy. Now, self-efficacy is, as we're going to define in just a minute, your confidence in your ability to engage in a behavior. Now, when you hear about self-efficacy, you may think about this quote, and that is that, well, gosh, makes so much sense that why would anybody question this, or why would anybody study this? Isn't it just common sense? Well, as it turns out, common sense sometimes is not so common, and that's exactly what we're going to find out with self-efficacy. Now, ask yourself some of these questions that I'm going to pose to you. Answer them 1 to 4, 1 being not at all true and 4 being exactly true. I can always manage to solve difficult problems if I try hard enough. So is that not at all true, hardly true, moderately true, or exactly true? If someone opposes me, I can find the means and ways to get what I want. It is easy for me to stick to my aims and accomplish my goals. I am confident that I could deal efficiently with unexpected events. Thanks to my resourcefulness, I know how to handle unforeseen situations. I can solve most problems if I invest the necessary effort. I can remain calm when facing difficulties because I can rely on my coping abilities. When I am confronted with a problem, I can usually find several solutions. If I am in trouble, I can usually think of a solution. Spelled incorrectly, sorry. Now, if you respond true to most of these items, then we would consider, and this is not self-efficacy about health-related behaviors necessarily, as much as kind of social capabilities and social maneuvering behaviors. But if you respond true to these, then we would report that you generally have high social self-efficacy, meaning in your interpersonal skills and your ability to get along with others and interact with others. We might ask similar questions related to physical activity. So, I manage to exercise regularly. Even if it's difficult, or even under cases where there is bad weather, I can find a way to exercise regularly, and so on and so forth. Now, how did self-efficacy come about? Well, you may recall the discussion we had about how health behavior theories came about. And that was that there was originally two paradigms or two camps of people. So one of them believing that behavior was mostly caused by environmental determinants, things that happen in the environment, meaning that they do not involve the individual or the person. That train of thought was very popular in the 1950s and into the 1960s. Especially when B.F. Skinner and his constituents were very popular in conducting a lot of research and had a lot of influence. Well, a little bit later than that, a guy named Albert Bandura made this recognition that reinforcement and environmental determinants of behavior are very important. Notwithstanding, we make decisions based upon our thought process. Now that doesn't seem odd to you, and shouldn't, because all of us have our own experiences where we think about what we're going to do. It's just that from a scientific standpoint, that's very difficult because I don't know what you're thinking. I can't see your thoughts, and therefore I don't account for those because I can't see them. Well, Albert Bandura said, even though we can't see them, from an intervention standpoint or trying to change people's behavior, we need to account for them. And so he developed what we call self-efficacy, which grew out of social cognitive or social learning theory, which we're going to talk about next. And because it's so prominent, meaning self-efficacy is so prominent, it's both a construct and a theory. And Albert Bandura defines it as the belief in one's own ability to successfully accomplish something. And in his own words, he said, efficacious people set challenging goals and maintain strong commitment to them. In the face of impending failure, they increase and sustain their efforts to be successful. They approach difficult or threatening situations with confidence that they have control over them. Having this type of outlook reduces stress and lowers the risk of depression. Now, what sorts of things contribute to self-efficacy? And we call these constructs in this theory that we call self-efficacy theory. So the first one being mastery experience and or performance accomplishments, vicarious experience, verbal persuasion, and somatic and emotional states. This first one, mastery experience. So people are likely to believe that they can do something new if it's similar to something they have already done and already done well. So when I asked you if you could run 10 miles, perhaps you used as a point of reference your history of running. So if you had run 10 miles in the past, and perhaps done so recently, and let's say it was a favorable outcome or favorable experience, meaning that you liked it or enjoyed it, or at least it wasn't too painful, then you're likely to report high self-efficacy. Well, let's say maybe you aren't even a runner, but you play basketball a lot, or you play tennis a lot, or you are generally in good health because you're very physically active. So because you've done a behavior similar to running, you're likely to report high self-efficacy for running. And of course the complement is true as well. If you don't engage in any of those behaviors that might be similar to running, or have done so but it was very painful and it was a terrible experience, it's likely that you will report low self-efficacy. Now those would be true for physical activity. They might also be true for other behaviors, say for example an adolescent and substance abuse, or when he or she is first approached to, let's say for example, smoke cigarettes or use marijuana, and is approached by peers. And they approach him or her and say something like, hey, I'd like you to try this, or hey, why don't you try this? Everybody's doing this, or perhaps a boyfriend or a girlfriend or somebody that's very popular would approach a student and offer them a drug. Now, the ability to turn down the drug is something that would involve self-efficacy. So how confident are you that you could say no? What sorts of things might contribute to that? Well, have I ever turned down peer pressure in the past? Perhaps I have not. And if I have not, say, for example, in the past when, and maybe it wasn't drug related, but maybe it was peer pressure nonetheless, when I was a little bit younger and kids said at school, hey, why don't you pull the fire alarm? Or why don't you say this in class in front of the teacher? You'll get a great reaction. And so to the extent that I have either turned that down or said no to that peer pressure, or maybe I've succumbed to it, those sorts of outcomes and those sorts of experiences would contribute to my self-efficacy for saying no to peer pressure related to substance abuse or using a drug or experimenting with marijuana or tobacco. One of the examples that I'll show you in just a minute, and was in the book, is related to babysitting as a predictor of mother confidence. So, if I, as a young woman or had engaged in babysitting, say for example when I was younger, I've changed diapers, I've fed a baby, I've been around them when they make noises that might otherwise be scary, like when it looks like they're coughing but they really aren't, or choking. So if I have done those things, then as a first-time mother, I have more confidence. My self-efficacy for being a mother is higher because I've engaged in behaviors that are very similar.